Just a few years ago, you probably knew NVIDIA as that company making graphics cards for teenage gamers, right? Well, today, they are the absolute, undisputed architects of the AI empire. Every single major tech giant, we're talking OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Meta, they literally cannot build the future without getting their hands on NVIDIA silicon first.
And that brings us to a massive, really fascinating question for this explainer. How exactly did one single company become the absolute bottleneck of the entire global AI economy? Well, the answer is this crazy story of invisible economics, a brilliant accident, and just massive strategic leverage.
Think about previous tech revolutions for a second. The rise of smartphones, search engines, social media. The ultimate economic winners were always the consumer apps, the software you and I actually tap and scroll through every day. But the AI revolution? It is fundamentally different. The biggest winner right now isn't an app at all. It's the company selling the picks and shovels. It's purely an infrastructure play.
And here's the wild part. This global dominance wasn't even the original plan. Back in the 1990s, Jensen Huang wasn't sitting around trying to build the foundational layer of artificial intelligence. Not at all. He was just trying to solve a super specific computing problem. How do we render video game graphics faster and smoother? So they spent decades perfecting this tech for gamers, completely unaware that this exact foundation would trigger the generative AI boom of the 2020s.
To understand why, we have to look at the hardware. Traditional CPUs process complex tasks sequentially. Basically, they knock out operations one right after the other, kind of like a single expert working down a checklist. But a graphics processing unit, or GPU, which NVIDIA pioneered, relies on parallel processing. It executes thousands of smaller mathematical operations all at the exact same time. For video games, that just meant rendering millions of pixels at once to create a really smooth, immersive environment.
But this perfectly sets up what business historians are probably going to call the greatest strategic accident in modern tech. You see, training modern AI models requires endless matrix multiplication. It's all about crunching massive data sets simultaneously. And guess what? That exact parallel computing architecture, built to render video game light and shadow, just happened to be the absolute perfect mathematical engine for artificial intelligence.
For years, GPUs were just this niche requirement. But then, ChatGPT dropped. And that release fundamentally altered the scale of demand literally overnight. The whole market suddenly realized that AI wasn't just another software category, it was a brand new global infrastructure grid. Every single new capability these companies wanted to develop required an unbelievable amount of compute power just to train and run.
And suddenly, the world's hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, ignited this massive arms race. They started pouring absolutely billions into capital expenditure to build out these giant AI server farms. And this CapEx matters so much because whoever builds the largest compute cluster essentially dictates the ceiling of next-generation AI models. If they don't buy the hardware today, they just fundamentally lose their platform dominance tomorrow. It's really that simple.
That hyperscaler arms race flows directly into NVIDIA's balance sheet. Just look at the projections for fiscal 2026. We are looking at an astonishing $215.9 billion in annual revenue. And that is driven almost entirely by this unprecedented, massive wave of cloud infrastructure spending.
If you want proof of exactly how far they've shifted from those gaming roots, just look at their Q4 data center business alone. It generated a staggering $62.3 billion. I mean, that scale completely cements their transition. They are no longer a consumer hardware company. They are the definitive provider of global AI infrastructure. Now, here is the secret that a lot of people miss. NVIDIA's true dominance isn't actually just the silicon. A truly great physical chip can eventually be reverse engineered or maybe outpaced by a highly motivated competitor. No, their unbreachable moat is actually CUDA. It's the proprietary software platform developers use to actually talk to the GPUs and optimize all those complex AI workloads.
Over the course of many, many years, NVIDIA meticulously built what we can call the CUDA Lock-in loop. First, they got universities and academic researchers to adopt CUDA for their projects. Then, when those researchers graduated and launched startups, well, they built their entire business workflows natively around it. And finally, the large companies integrated these deeply embedded systems. The entire AI industry literally learned to speak CUDA as its native language.
And that ecosystem creates basically the most powerful force in all of business: massive switching costs. Look, if a rival company comes along and builds a chip that's just as fast, or maybe even slightly faster, it doesn't immediately matter. replacing all those deeply embedded, highly customized software workflows that researchers and developers have spent years building. That is incredibly expensive, painfully slow, and just way too risky for any enterprise to undertake.
But beyond the software and the hardware, there's also a very human psychology driving this whole gold rush. In every major technological leap, there's one overriding emotion dominating corporate boardrooms: the sheer fear of falling behind. Think about it. No CEO on Earth wants to stand in front of their shareholders and explain why a rival company built the next massive AI breakthrough first, simply because they hesitated to acquire the necessary hardware.
So, these hyperscalers aren't just buying silicon, right? They are buying optionality. In a market where raw compute dictates your future capabilities, scooping up GPUs is essentially buying time. It's buying survival. The fear of missing out on the AI revolution easily overrides any desire to protect short-term profit margins, and that's exactly what's leading to these historic surges in capital expenditure.
It really forces us to rethink how we value tech companies. We usually assume the most valuable entities are the ones making those highly visible consumer products we hold in our hands every day. But NVIDIA's compute architecture operates completely like an invisible power grid. Consumers don't see the grid when they flip a light switch, and they definitely don't see it video when they query an AI app, yet the entire system relies entirely upon it.
However, if we look at business history, it proves that dominance is rarely permanent. As NVIDIA's empire scales to these totally unprecedented heights, they are essentially painting a massive target on their own back. The sheer scale of the profits they're extracting from the tech ecosystem pretty much guarantees fierce, heavily funded resistance.
And those threats to the empire are definitely mounting. First off, their biggest customers are actively developing their own custom silicon, like Google's TPUs, just to escape NVIDIA's margin premium. Second, as the AI market matures from training these massive foundational models to simply running them, which is known as inference, the underlying economic hardware requirements will absolutely shift. And third, they are facing an increasingly restrictive regulatory landscape. That regulatory landscape is crucial here. Geopolitics is actively reshaping the semiconductor market. We're seeing tightening export controls, specifically regarding China, which literally force NVIDIA to constantly redesign their chips just to comply with international regulations. That adds a really complex geopolitical hurdle to their operational growth, and it restricts their access to massive segments of global demand.
So, what this means is that NVIDIA is entering a completely new chapter. Their primary challenge isn't just inventing the future of graphics anymore, or jumpstarting the generative AI era. Their biggest challenge right now is defending their position. They have to fight tooth and nail to stay at the absolute center of this infrastructure that they accidentally helped create.
If there is one major historical business lesson to take away from this explainer, it's that in every single major technological revolution, whether we're talking about the railroads, the internet, or artificial intelligence, those who control the foundational infrastructure hold the ultimate leverage. They dictate the pace, the price, and the possibilities of the entire future.
So, as trillions of dollars continue to flow toward building smarter, faster artificial intelligence, the real question isn't who will build the coolest AI app. The true battle of our generation is this: who controls the compute underneath it all?